Japan inviting finance ministers from non-G7 countries on an a la carte basis, more or less.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, keep in mind, of course, China is not here, represented here. They're not part of the G7. They're not invited as guests, if you will, simply because there is a like-minded invitation, if you will, or getting those on board, other nations in what's been termed the Global South. We're talking India, we're talking Brazil, Indonesia, but also Singapore has been invited. Also South Korea, coming on the heels, of course, of that fairly warm meeting in Seoul between President Yoon and also Prime Minister Kishida. So the South Koreans will be represented here. And Janet Yellen has talked about this issue of supply chain resiliency through friendshoring. Supply chain resiliency is just another way of saying relying less on China for global supply chains. So, again, that will be discussed, as well as emerging market debt, a number of issues, and we're going to discuss all of this with a number of great interviews we have coming up. Tomorrow, my colleague Anne-Marie Hordern will be speaking exclusively with Janet Yellen. Later today, I will be speaking exclusively to the Bundesbank president, Joachim Nagel, right here at the G7 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting in Niigata, Japan. It hasn't even started yet. It starts at 2:30 p.m. Japan time. We're already on the ground running.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve Engel there. Let's just have a look at what's going on with some of these markets, and just taking a look at Chinese banks first of all, because we've got lenders there were up, but they lost some of the gains. We've got media reports saying the government's asked the big four state-owned ones to cut deposit rate ceilings on some of their products. SMIC out with numbers, terrible time of it. People are expecting a profit plunge, and JD.com comes out with flat results expected when it reports its latest figures coming up later today.
All right, still to come, the Adani Group considers a share sale as it seeks to win back investors. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg.
Welcome back. You are with Bloomberg Markets as we focus in on India and to have a look at some of those key stories investors are watching out for today. Now, we've got Go Air winning protection from leases as a local court. They allowed its insolvency proceedings to begin. Looking also at what's going on with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's inaugurating more than $700 million worth of infrastructure projects in the state of Rajasthan. Also, Adani Group shares. We're watching those closely. The company considering its first post-Hindenburg equity sale has.
And Rish, India's economic prospects are looking up with a fresh string of private sector notes showing optimism in equity and bond markets. Let's get more on that with Manika Doshi, a senior editor in Mumbai. And Manika, tell us about some of these projections.
There seems to be an India fever going on, if not across the world, at least in India. Just in this past week, 3 reports out, one on the economy, one on equities, and one on, India's external situation in bonds. HSBC saying now's the time for India if the country plays its cards right. Jeffrey saying the country is definitely on the path of a capex cycle recovery, and Gavical Research saying that the changes that are taking place on the external account front could be transformational for the economy. So like I said, there is an India fever going on. What with India in the news all the time with G20, etc.
Manika, what is the basis for them to be so bullish here? There are a lot of people, actually, that are bullish outside of India as well.
Let me give you a quick gist of what each of those reports says. For instance, HSBC makes the case for 7.5% growth if India wants to add the 70 million jobs that it needs over the course of the next 10 years. And HSBC says India can get to 7.5% growth over the next 10 years if New India, that's high-tech industries, tech startups, can help old India through digitalization, e-commerce, etc. So that's the HSBC scenario. Then you've got Jeffrey saying that they see all the signs indicating towards a capital cycle revival in India. So from the property upcycle to government capex to deleveraging and a bigger risk appetite. And they're confident that consumption has peaked off and now it's the turn of a capital cycle to take place in the country. And Gavical Research, referencing India's attempts to pay for crude purchases using the rupee, saying that if it succeeds in doing so, a cycle may unfold with capital inflows, a stronger rupee, and lower inflation. So all 3 reports, in a sense, looking at macro and micro situations, pertaining to India, but all sounding very, very positive and optimistic on the economy.
Manika, you got to wonder about valuations, whether or not they're reflecting all the optimism already.
Yes, of course. I don't think any of these are reports that, sort of talk to the next 3 or 6 months has. They're all looking at the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Because as you know, India's had, for instance, limited success in rupee payments with crude. In fact, Bloomberg's been reporting, that Russia doesn't want any more rupee payments. So this is, I think, a view to what India could potentially achieve over the course of the next 5 years. So it may not speak to immediate valuations, as you pointed out, which are interesting to watch in the equity markets right now.
I want to just dial back to what we had with GoAir. We got a court ruling, Manika. Well, what was this all about? And it's not the only airline in trouble, is it, in the country?
No, it isn't. So we're shifting to corporate news, and it is a busy news day here in India. GoAir did manage to win that time reprieve that we've been talking about over the course of the last few days. Essentially, it filed for insolvency because it wanted to keep at bay many of the lessors that were seeking to reclaim its aircraft. Of that 54 aircraft fleet, all of them are leased aircraft, and they had notices to reclaim more than 30 aircraft. And they were keen that this insolvency filing, which if it succeeded in court, as it did yesterday, would give them a moratorium period, or a period in which all debts, all outstandings come to a standstill, as a result of which they hoped they could get back on their feet, get their planes back in the air, and use that time also to continue their litigation against Pratt & Whitney for more engines, which is one of the core reasons for why that airline has had to suspend all operations.
Manika, hang tight as we continue to look at India. HSBC saying it sees India's tech-focused sectors driving growth to 6.5% annually, more than doubling the economy size in the decade. The bank's chief India economist Pranjal Bhandari joins us in Mumbai. Pranjal, good to have you with us. I'm just wondering why, you expect the Indian tech sector to remain resilient when customers overseas, like the ones in the US and Europe, are expecting a slowdown.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So, what we call this new India. It's made up of two high-tech sectors. One is this exports of high-tech goods and services, and the other is the high-tech startups ecosystem. I think all of these continue to grow.